Welcome and good morning. My name is Lena Henriksson and I'm head of communication at Nordic Innovation, and I will guide you through this session where we will discuss practical insights that will help us form the future. The title of this seminar is Circularity in Minerals and How Can We Use What We Already Have? Recycling in critical raw materials. I will first of all welcome Per Langhaus from Ragn-Sells. Welcome up to the stage. Here we can. Yes, please introduce yourself.
Thank you so much. Per Larsson from Ragn-Sells. I am Head of Sustainability and Public Affairs. And we are a family-owned business that originated from 1881, focusing on waste management. But in 2015, we understood that in a perfect circular economy, there is no waste, and there is no business for us then. So we need to understand what will our role become in the future. And that was the insight that we need to become a raw material supplier and detoxifier. And based on that, we in 1881 brought back latrines from the inner city of Stockholm to the surroundings of Stockholm. Phosphorus, nitrogen, nutrients were a key component.
Thank you, Per. And please, Hanne, can you please... Heidi, I'm sorry, Heidi, please, can you come up on stage? And you can take one of those microphones. Yes, please, can you introduce yourself? You come from Outokumpu, and you are Vice President for Sustainability.
Yes, thank you so much for the invitation. For those who don't know what Outokumpu is, we are the global leader in low-emission stainless steel. We have already today over 90% recycled material content, so we're really driving circularity. We're also operating the only chromium mine within the European Union, so play a very important role in the critical raw materials as well.
Thank you, Heidi. And please, Hanne Simonsen, can you please come up on stage? You come from Hydro.
Yes, hi, good morning. My name is Hanne Simonsen, heading aluminium metal in Hydro, which is, we are leading supplier of both low carbon and recycled aluminium. And the beauty with aluminium is that it can be recycled again and again and again. And it's a critical raw material defined by EU. So that's what we discuss today.
Thank you, Hanne. And then we have Sindre Bornstein, CEO at Nordic Innovation.
Hi, everyone. My name is Sindre Bornstein, head of Nordic Innovation, part of the Nordic Collaboration and the Nordic Council of Ministers. Well, we like ourselves as a catalyst for... We like to think of ourselves as a catalyst for change in the Nordic region, where we drive innovation and we act on the initiative taken by the Nordic Prime Ministers that the Nordic region shall be, within 2030, the most sustainable and integrated region in the world. And circular thinking has been a really deep part of the work that we've been doing in our project portfolio for the last 5 to 10 years. And we see it as really important that we build circularity in our business models going forward. And it's an integral part of the innovation happening in the Nordic region.
Okay, and I think that if we want the microphones to work, we really have to keep it really close like this. And as you know, materials and critical raw materials are necessary for the green transition and in the hands of a few countries. And we must recycle and reuse the minerals and the waste that we already have. So I will start with the big picture and maybe a global context. Per, will Western countries have access to critical minerals in the future, or will the supply be dominated by China and USA? What do you think?
What will happen is that more and more circularity will become as a tool to make sure that we can supply ourselves with the resources. And today, honest, we have a linear system. Even here at COP, we are talking about making just transition from fossil to fossil free. I would like to see a dramatic change, how we can really make the transformation becoming circular, to make sure that we stop wasting resources. And especially when it comes to phosphorus, China is very interesting because they closed the border of selling phosphorus based on that. They understood that in 50 years from now, they will not have any more phosphorus. So they did make sure for the source of supply, they closed the border. And that skyrocketed the price in 2020. So phosphorus is a very specific subject because we have almost only one mine in the world, and that's the Moroccan mine.
Thank you. Is there anyone else who want to will we have the resources in Europe? What do you think, Hanne?
No, I think my starting point when talking about aluminium as a critical raw material is that we in Europe are exporting close to 2 million tons of scrap every year. The same in the US, by the way. And that's a question, because if you think about having resilient value chains, robust value chains, competitive value chains, and also sustainable value chains, that's a lost opportunity. So I think we should think about that. How do we get that back in the loop?
And is there anyone here who have the answer? Maybe Heidi?
Not the answer, but also I mentioned we are operating the only European Union, and in the US, chromium is defined as a critical raw material. So I think in Europe, we are slowly starting to wake up that these are really important materials for the green transition, and we need to secure them, and that also includes chromium.
Okay, thank you. And how do these geopolitical dynamics affects our ability to secure these raw materials? I mean, what can we do actually if we talk action, if it's not just talking and hoping? What do you think? Are there really some cases that we can show that are working? Yes?
I can start to say, when I back again to phosphorus. For example, Canada are dependent by US to 98.5% of phosphorus supply. So suddenly now what's happening in the relation between Canada and US has all started an understanding that Canada need to find other ways to supply its phosphorus. I will next week be in Canada because we have now a partner that like to source phosphorus from what we will now start to produce in Germany and Sweden with the first 2 phosphorus factories. So again, the geopolitics are really playing in. And when it comes to phosphorus, I mentioned China when they closed the border. The consequence by that in 2020 was that Sri Lanka decided to go fully organic. That was what they announced. The real reason was that the state budget couldn't afford the subsidies they were forced to pay to give the farmers phosphorus. The end was crisis and almost revolution because the food production fell with 50% the next harvest, but they couldn't get any fertilizers. So geopolitics, yes, phosphorus are really a very hot topic. And if you don't have food for 3 days, we have a revolution. So I would like to not only have phosphorus as a critical resource, but also as a very strategic resource going forward, and also for Europe, of course.
Yes, Hanne?
I know your question was about what is actionable,
Yes.
but I think its starting point is to be talking about it like we do now,
Yes.
to be aware of the lost opportunity and see what can we do with that. So then what we can do is linked to technology, is about value chains, and it's also about partnerships. And in addition to that, I think it's also linked to design for circularity. So we are discussing with architects and people which is actually designing the products. It could be a building, it could be a bike, it could be a car. How do you get more of recycled material into the loop, into applications? And then it's about technology, which is about collecting and sorting, making sure that we could actually all grade scrap and upgrade it into valuable products. But I'm optimistic if we do all of this in the same time.
Okay. I can hear here that the value chain, that's really important. Sindre, would you comment on that? Or
I really want to take a step back and just let the penny drop that we're talking about critical raw materials, materials that are needed if we are to succeed with the green transition that we're on and the digital transition. So if we don't have these materials, we won't succeed with this transition. So I think that's sort of the macro picture that we should start with. That said, we're seeing some really good industry examples as represented on the panel here by the industry representatives. But we're still in the early phases. There's a lot to be done to really industrialize and scale the circular aspects around critical raw materials. And I think that if we are to succeed, back to your question, Lena, we really need to see a tango between the government's side and the regulatory side and the industry. Now we're seeing a lot of good leadership happening in the industry. We need to see the same leadership also happening from the political side. I think we're in the starting phase, and I'm looking forward to seeing how that tango is evolving in the future.
yes, I see Per want to comment.
Yeah, I fully echo with that. And I think somehow, how do we find an environment, a level playing field for the industry and companies to actually be rewarded for circularity? I think there is, as you said, there is a lot of good initiatives, and we're really hoping to see kind of a tangible action and regulation that will support that. And I think for us, for example, ETS, the Circular Economy Act, they are really good kind of starting points. But now we just have to make sure that these are implemented.
And Per?
And on my wish list here on COP, I really hope that in the final protocol that we'll have some lines about circularity. Hopefully that circularity can become a tool that you need to integrate. The challenge I see is that we almost only talk about fossil fuel reduction. And we see now that more and more countries are implementing national climate laws. These climate laws can be a threat to circular transformation. Because if you're sourcing something, you're setting up a process where the reduction of CO2 emissions are in another country. You might even go against the law because you might raise the emissions in your country. So it's very important that climate laws not only targeting reduction of the fossil fuels in the country, but also allows the reduction of CO2 emissions if you have a process that delivers in other countries. And I see this as a big problem of scaling circularity. And if you scale circularity, you will also increase job growth. It's not reduction of problems, it's creating new businesses. So really emphasize this as an important tool here at COP, and also change laws like the Swedish law. The Swedish law are focusing on just fossil fuel reduction, unfortunately.
Okay, thank you. Heidi? Or
I
Hanne?
think it's easy to come with simple solutions. I think it's a lot that needs to be done at the same time. And we are discussing here on COP also decarbonization, actually to have incentives to decarbonize the hard-to-abate sector. So that needs to continue. And at the same time, circularity is also part of that. How could we get more of the value chain back in? Therefore, I believe we need also politicians to focus on lead markets, like also the circular discussion going on in Europe, but also Industrial Acceleration Act, as a way for politicians to also try to in demand side. That could be public procurement, that could be in defining standards or requirements on circularity into different sectors.
Thank you. And do you think that this is the first time we have circularity on COP actually in this way? How do you think this will affect the negotiations? Do you think that will have an impact?
I had a meeting this morning with one of the negotiators, and there will come some statement later in the afternoon where we might see some mention about circularity. And if that happens, they can start to negotiate about it. So they are discussing on a high level. So I hope that happens. But I can give you one example of how important it is. If we can sell the phosphorus that we collect from the sewage sludge based on the quality that we can produce, then the cost for the society to implement the circular transformation of phosphorus will be paid by the private sector because it becomes so highly profitable. That's the reason why we will export phosphorus to Canada, because there we can sell it with a high value meaning we can sell it as a feed phosphate. And we can't do that in Europe today because they have a principled legislation, meaning that if it has been waste, you're not allowed to use it. And that is totally anti-circular, of course. So again, the message is make sure that circularity are a key component. Make sure that, of course, that we keep safe guard so it doesn't create health problems, but make sure that we enable circularity as much as possible. That's extremely important.
Wow, that was really a teaser that maybe we have some news this afternoon. That would be great and really fast, hopefully. I hope that we can, the discussion will continue after COP also. And Sindre, we've been working with circular minerals for a couple of years now. What do you think about being here at COP and see that circularity takes so much questions and they talk about it?
I think it's fantastic, and I think back to your point earlier, it's really about a mindset change going into circular thinking, and part of our responsibility, I think, coming from the industry and coming from the degree, we have a lot of good examples we can share. Bringing that into the conversation and an arena here at the COP, I think is fantastic. I'm learning a lot this week, and I hope that we, from the Nordic side, can provide some insight from what's been working in the Nordic region on the industry side back into the conversations here. So I'm really positive, and I think it's about a narrative change, a mindset change, and it's all our shared responsibility to bring that conversation front and center. So if we get to see a result like this week, that would be fantastic. And can I just mention one more thing? One of the things that we've been observing in the years that we have been working with projects to stimulate circular thinking, and especially around critical raw materials, is that it takes coordination in the value chain or in the ecosystem. So how do we make that happen? So I would love to hear from the industry representatives here. How have you coordinated amongst your value chain on the examples that you have been doing? I think that's something where we in the Nordic region might have an edge because we have societies built on a collaborative mindset.
Yeah.
Yes.
Quickly, from the sector perspective. On the other side, we are already today producing recycled steel, so over 90% coming from recycled raw materials. And we work very closely with our customers, and sometimes circularity can be even a stronger value proposition than purely reduced CO2 emissions. At the same time, we have been talking a lot about reimagining the business models, which is a bit what you referred on. Steel industry creates a lot of side streams, and when we invest to decarbonization, we might be commercializing in the future biogenic CO gas, which could actually help the aviation industry or chemical industry. So it's not necessarily only about what you have been doing in the past as a company, but very much on what is the potential of circularity beyond that as well.
I think we got one question from this side, some examples we'll come back to. But I just wanted to say something related to COP, because in Hydro, we strongly believe that a green and just transition needs to go hand in hand. And circularity actually plays an important role in that. We're talking about here local value chains. Well, local value chains that could create jobs, value creation, lift competence, and have a positive CO2 and nature impact. So you get everything in one. And I think that's the selling point for us actually also discussing circularity in COP. I think is important. To your question about partnerships, we believe and is working with that strategically. I could come with a lot of examples, but just to mention a couple. In the US, we are partnering up with a sorting company. So we go into a joint venture where they have the competence of sorting, we have the offtake, we have the aluminium value chain, then easily we get more scale. So that's one example. Another example, I mentioned a bike producer. So when we partner up with an end consumer and see how could we change from your high carbon parts of the bike to a recycled bike. And we have succeeded over time using the expertise of both sides. So now Brompton Bike is using 100% recycled aluminium for producing the rim in the car, in the bike. These were just two examples.
That was a good example. Please, Per, can you
I
continue?
can give one very good example. And our insight when we started working with this in 2015 was that we will supply phosphorus to the market. The problem was that we were still in the mindset of waste management company. Then suddenly we did an analysis and understood that, well, in the future, we're part of a different value chain. We're part of the food value chain. So then we need to find partners in the food value chain. The example in Canada, where we have a supplier of feed phosphate. On Monday last week, Monday, Tuesday, I was in Norway and visiting our fish sludge collection scheme, together with one of the biggest food retailers in the world, that in this case would like to supply themselves with sustainable salmon. But the whole concept is that can we collect the fish sludge, the fish poo, then the fish farmer can double or double their production of salmon. And the system as such can be paid if we can then also sell the phosphorus as a feed phosphate. So suddenly we can double the production in our aquaculture globally, and we can do that in a more sustainable way. And we know that the only place in the world where we can increase food production is in the aquaculture. So there's a win-win-win. And the only thing we need, the small tiny part, is that we can sell the phosphorus based on quality. Today in the EU, it's totally forbidden to sell phosphorus from aquaculture, even as a fertilizer. So please support us in transforming the legislation.
May I
Yes,
comment on that?
please,
I think
Heidi.
This is a really important point. I mean, there is CBAM, there is Circularity Act, the lead markets that are advancing this. But at the same time, on national level, on EU level, how do we define byproduct side streams, or how, and a good example, for example, is the slag that's coming out of the steel production process. Is that defined as waste or as a byproduct, which then actually accelerates the use of these side streams? And I think this is something where we still have a lot of work to be done to make sure we are increasing circularity and not destroying it.
Okay, thank you. Sindre, I see that you want to comment also.
Just want to add to this conversation as well that one aspect that we're seeing is that having the mapping of what's available, the side streams, the data around it is really important. So I just wanted to refer to one project that we've started in our pre-project where in the Nordics we're setting up something called a critical raw materials center to really map the data or the material flows. So that's a really good starting point, like back to your example, and that you need in order to actually think circular. So I think that's a sort of an enabling component that's really important to lift into this conversation.
Yes, thank you. Do we see any risks talking about circularity and where we are, or are there only opportunities? What do you think? Yes, Per?
No, of course, there's big risk, especially the way the circularity are treated today. You need always to include a detoxification step, because we have a lot of things in our ecosystem that don't want to recirculate. So again, circularity comes with responsibility, and we need to then have large-scale processes in place to make sure that we also can afford this detoxification part. So, and that is very important. And I was that secretary that met the minister from Indonesia that said, well, now we're going to close all our landfills. And I said, oh no, what will happen with the things that you don't want to have in the ecosystem? So we need to have the mind shift change, but not saying that landfills are bad. Landfills are very good if they're managed in the right way. But of course, you should not landfill organic materials that you can produce biogas from. So again, it's back to how you do it. So circularity will transform a lot of things, how you design things, of course, but also how you treat things. And you need to understand that the only way to really make sure that the valuable resources are brought back, you need to do it in large scale.
No, first, I wanted just to commit a comment to your thing here about the fish farming, the salmon. We actually use now the slag from the fish farming to translate into biogas being used in a cast house in Sunndal to produce aluminium. So that's an example again of how you could create new value streams out of waste. But of course, it's a lot of challenges. I think no company alone can translate or transform a value chain. it's not possible. So we need regulations, we need partnerships, and I think also from a consumer perspective, it's quite confusing. What do we mean by recycling? I think that also where regulators can actually help to set some standards and definitions. What is the difference, for example, from recycling material that comes out of an industrial process, so versus a product which is coming back in the loop? I think here we need also to help the consumers to have an opportunity to make informed decisions.
Okay, Heidi?
Absolutely. Yeah, and I think it's not necessarily a risk of circularity, but if we consider stainless steel, what makes stainless steel corrosion resistant, what makes it actually stainless steel is the primary raw material. So even though we have, yes, last year we had 95% recycled material, always need virgin raw materials, which is why it's super important to partner with suppliers and to how we can find low carbon primary raw materials or virgin raw materials. And partnerships play a crucial role. And those are usually global partnerships. It's not within European Union where our suppliers are.
Okay, thank you. Good discussion. If we talk a little bit about innovation and practical solutions, what do you think about business models that could support this change in value chain? Do you have any examples of that, or how do we work with these business models? Because we have to change them. Don't you think so? How do you work in your companies?
Maybe I can start. What has been mentioned several times before is this type of ecosystems, and we're moving from very linear value chains into more circular, where there is a lot of players. And our production site in Tornio is a good example that when we are commercializing the side streams, biogenic side streams, for example, how can we partner with companies physically and build these type of ecosystems? So I think it's not anymore so much as what we as a company do, but how can we support the whole ecosystem around us?
Okay, thank you. Per?
In the project in Estonia, we are using carbon dioxide that we mix with calcium oxide. It becomes precipitated calcium carbonate. Here we have 9 end users, 9 companies. One example is Tarkett. Today they source their PCC, that is a filler, from crushed limestone. Here we can use carbon dioxide to produce it. So yes, business model is how you can make sure that the companies producing resources using recycling content and are part of the process to also set up those innovations. Again, we have a small challenge that we can't have access to CO2, because the regulation in the US says if you're collecting CO2, all the subsidies, all the regulations, all the standards says you need to put it into an old borehole. So again, if we can use CO2, produce a raw material that can then recirculate it, it will be a really big win for the society, really big win for the environment. And circularity is not only CO2 if you do it the right way. You can also reduce the risk that they overshoot any of the planetary boundaries if we have the detoxification dimension. So circularity has many positive things.
Yes. Anne?
Yeah, I was thinking about technology. I mentioned that a lot of aluminium is now being exported as scrap out of Europe and out of US. It goes to different countries in the East, being hand sorted. Question mark about some of that human rights aspects around that. So how could we keep that and keep that competitive inside Europe, inside different regions or countries? It's a lot about technology development to be able to scale it, to make it into industrial value chains and not just good examples. So what we have done is to develop a technology called high sort, where you could take a lot of different kind of more complex scrap and sort it and make sure that you know the chemical composition of all the pieces so that you could upgrade to high quality products. And I think we need to see more of that.
Okay. Do we see more of that? Can we see yes?
We see a lot of attention to both creating value chains, more demand for recycled products. That's why I also said I'm optimistic. I see it's happening. So it's also a race, actually to be the most competitive one, developing the value chains, the technology, having the customer base, and so on.
Oh, that's good to know. That's hopeful. But do we have enough customers for secondary raw materials? Are there? Yes? Heidi?
I think there probably is a lot of there are enough customers, and I fully echo with the point that how do we ensure that scrap is also considered as a valuable critical raw material for Europe? I think we see a lot of discussion around that. Maybe something that we see now from the end customer perspective, and we can always argue who is actually the end customer, but the ones that really benefit from having greener materials, that they are interested in how can we create this closed loop so that we would get the end product which is no more needed, take it in and use that as a raw material for their new products and create this somewhat closed loops thinking. And that can become a very strong value proposition to the electronics industry, to elevators, whatever the industry is. So I think that we also need to think how do we commercialize the value of circularity in addition to technology and partnerships and suppliers.
Yeah, it's a little bit about the narrative also then. Maybe we need to think about it already now. What do you think, Per?
Yeah, I think narrative is important, but also standards are important to influence. And one example is the climate solution. We had one of our processes was on Monday verified as a climate solution based on the UN Race to Zero program. And it means that the process as such are better than the climate law or follows the climate law. In our case, we have a process to recirculate solvents. We bring solvents, methanol, ethanol, and so forth, to our plant. It's a joint venture together with a producer of the solvents. That in this case now, if you compare to virgin produced resources, the output solvent that are of a very good quality are almost 90% lower CO2 emissions. And here we see a driver from the customers, because the customers can now supply themselves with a solvent that will directly reduce their scope 3 emissions. In our case, we do have a problem though, because normally the solvents that you are collecting are transported and shipped to Germany where they are incinerated. So it means that the factory that we are setting up in Sweden will have some small emissions, but the positive accounting will be in Germany. So again, the problematic we're having national thinking when it comes to climate laws are a problem. But the interest for the customers are there, and we already have an interest to have even higher prices than from virgin, because they can really make this huge saving in CO2 emissions.
Yes. Heidi, did you want to comment? Or?
No, I think I fully agree, and I think it comes back to how do we get the whole value chain. There can be a premium with circularity, can always be more cost efficient, but especially when we maybe invest into the innovation technologies, we are aiming to produce low carbon metals, so chromium metal, ferrochrome, potentially even nickel in the future, and that's something that we need to, as a whole value chain, share the kind of investment cost.
But if you're implementing circular processes, you should never count on having a premium, because that's a big risk. Premium comes as a plus afterwards. And our process with solvents are not dependent on a premium. But now we get the premium, it becomes even more profitable. So that's good.
Yeah, absolutely. Circularity can be a very positive business case.
Yeah. I think Hanne wants to comment also. Yeah.
No, I think we still have a job to do, because also something about perception with the end consumers to create scale. It's something about scrap is not low quality. Scrap could be at least the same quality and can also have a lower footprint, CO2 footprint. But the perception with many customer groups is still that scrap is scrap. So here we have a job to do. And of course, the investments done in technologies, in creating a value chain, doesn't come for free. So we could debate back and forth, the way do we demand a premium, or at least we need to show to the customer that this comes with a value. And you need to actually pay for that value. Otherwise, we will not be able to create that change.
Yes, Sindre wanted to comment?
Yeah, I want to pick up on the point of perception. I think it's really important that also when it comes to perception, that we shouldn't have the thinking in our societies that we're at the finish line of our capacity on circularity around raw materials. I think we're at the starting point. So that when it comes to perception, I think that's part of the storytelling, that we're really at the start of the race. And an indicator that is, I find very powerful is if you look at the EU's Critical Raw Materials Act, it puts a requirement of 25% recycling of the raw materials. The numbers I've heard is that in the Nordic region, we're around 1 to 2%. So that shows the potential. So we're not by any means at the finish line. So I think the perception also is valid for that sort of point of view.
Yes, and I was actually taking the subway in Stockholm a couple of weeks ago, and I saw that Svemin, the organization in Sweden, they had a big campaign in the subway. You know, you were going up the stairs and you saw these pictures of raw material explaining what it was used for. And I thought it was really smart, because I think maybe we should start from there. Maybe we should start from the end customers also, not just thinking about the industry. So what could we do a little bit about this storytelling, because that's important for us also working with circularity and minerals. We really are looking for what are the cue to explain this and get people involved and really accept it. What do you think? What could be the nod that we could talk about?
In 2022, I was honored to do a speech for World Customs Organization. The headline of my speech was, not only rich people should be able to buy eggs in the future, but that's the real consequence. Egg production, what do the eggs need? Yeah, they need to eat food every day. And what are one of the main ingredients to produce more and better eggs? Phosphorus. So again, if you can't supply them with phosphorus, the cost for the consumer will triple. And very short, in 2024, I was invited to UNIA 6 to do a keynote. In the evening, I put on the TV show in Nairobi, and the headline was that a woman was interviewed by the local TV channel that egg prices since 2020, when the prices skyrocketed of phosphorus, has now tripled, even in this case in Kenya. So again, price, food production, if you can relate that, then all people will be really terrified. And if they understand that phosphorus are one key component, we will have their support.
Thank you. Hanne, what do you think could be the key?
I don't think it's one recipe. I think it depends a little bit on the segments and the markets you're in. But I do believe that people in general like that something is local. It's more that something we own here. And it resonates for many people. This is something we control. That is something we could develop and bring back in the loop. And that create that kind of awareness. That is something that could be done in the local societies. I think that's something that resonates many places.
Thank you. Okay, we're wrapping up a little bit. What would you take with you what would you like to take with you as a hook when you leave COP30 and this circular COP, if we could call it that?
Yes, we hope that we have an announcement that circularity are important to decarbonize. So that's my big wish. And I listened to Ellen MacArthur Foundation yesterday, and they also announced that they now have agreed that there will be a discussion about carbon counting, and if you can count emissions in the value chain, how you do the positive counting. So there's something going on, not here at COP, but in the standardization process. But hopefully circularity are mentioned in the final protocol.
Thank you. Heidi?
Yeah, I think I would say a bit wider beyond circularity, which is important, of course, our business model being based on it. But I think we hope to see a very action and implementation orientated report that we are really now making changes. I think we've discussed in many panels and dialogues that the private sector has really now shown up, and we really need governments and regulation to also be there and focus on the action and not just maybe long-term promises.
Hanne?
Yeah, supported to last. I think we could hope, as also a leading supplier of low carbon and recycled aluminium, I really hope to see something about circularity in the final statement. So I cross fingers for that. And then at the same time, I think what we are discussing here, there are a lot of opportunities And still, with the complexity we have ahead of us, it's a lot about partnerships. The industry can do their part. We need policymakers, which is now becoming more firm on something more clear and more actionable. And then I think we also should highlight something about traceability. We must avoid greenwashing. We must avoid that consumers are felt uncertain. We must help the consumers to take informed decisions, and here regulators could also have an important role.
Thank you. Cinder, do you would like to say something?
I agree to the points being made here, so I want to take it from a different angle. I want to say that I hope to leave COP having seen more people becoming circular curious, if you will. I think it's a good indicator that industry is showing up here at COP, sharing examples, providing that into the conversation at COP. So coming from the Nordic nations, I want to use a picture of a snowball. I mean, let's get this snowball rolling and get the curiosity around the power of circularity. I think that's something I want to see. It's a softer thing, but I think that's important as well. It's a movement and it's a snowball. Let's get the snowball rolling.
Okay, government and businesses must work together to get this change going. Do we have any questions from the audience? Yes, please.
Thank you. Yes, my name is Salim Ali. I'm a professor in the US, but I'm also a member of the UN's International Resource Panel. And I'm wondering if the messaging you're giving is that a more regional systems-wide approach is needed. Does the NDC framework itself create a barrier then to having circularity, based on especially what Per was saying? Should the NDC system be reformed?
Okay, who would like to answer? Per?
Yeah, I believe the NDCs need to acknowledge that it's good that circularity are a key element, and they accept that the reduction of the CO2 emissions are in other countries. That would be very important. And I know that circularity became, for the first time, a part of the papers from COP28, when it was mentioned as one of the elements how the NDCs should be defined. So they now should acknowledge the circularity. And I have not gone through all the NDCs. All has not been published either. So so it will be very interesting. But I think it's really, after the last COP, I became more stressed about this matter. So I really would like to see that we take the responsibility bigger than the own country.
Yes, Heidi?
Yeah, I would say that circularity is the key enabler to reduce emissions, but it's also a way to increase resilience. It's the way to increase autonomy for national, EU level, global. So I think that it's important that we think of it as one of the key enablers to really push down CO2 emissions.
Thank you. Are there any more questions? No? Well, thank you. We give a big hand to our panel, and thank you for coming also.